All right, so AI, right. It feels like it went from like science fiction to like the biggest thing in tech almost overnight.
Yeah, it's been wild.
And every company wants in.
Absolutely.
But we've got some really interesting material here that really zones in on one of the biggest companies, Apple. And the question this piece asks is actually super fascinating. In all this AI hype, is Apple facing a crisis?
Ooh.
Let's deep dive into this and see what the sources are saying.
Yeah, sounds good.
So what's your take on the whole AI landscape right now? It just seems like everyone is scrambling to figure it all out.
Well, the first thing that really jumps out is just how fast consumer AI has gone from kind of a niche thing to, being everywhere.
Yeah.
And the sources really highlight this. They remind us just how quickly things change in tech. I mean, look at Skype.
Oh, yeah.
It was the go-to for video calls, and then boom, Zoom comes along after 2020 and kind of just takes over. It proves that even the big players can be caught off guard. Then you have ChatGPT just exploding in popularity with millions of users seemingly overnight.
I know. I started using it immediately.
Yeah, me too. It was like the whole world was suddenly talking about AI, and every tech company had to figure out their response.
Right. And we all know Apple's playbook, right? They're not usually the first ones out the gate with something brand new.
Right.
But they take their time, refine it, and then execute in a way that just clicks with people. The article even mentions examples like, OLED screens, wireless earbuds, tablets, even the iPhone itself. Apple didn't invent any of those things.
Nope.
But they sure made a huge impact when they released their versions. It's the classic Apple second mover strategy.
Yeah, that strategy has worked really well for them, especially with hardware.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what do you think made that approach so effective for them in the past?
I think a big part of it was their ability to tap into these already existing ecosystems. They would take these established technologies and polish them up and make the user experience just so much better.
Right, like they're known for that seamless integration or the whole Apple ecosystem thing.
Exactly. But here's the thing. With AI, things might be different.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The current AI landscape is all about rapid evolution, constant data feedback loops for model training, and you need to be iterating features really quickly.
You're saying waiting might not be an advantage this time.
Exactly. It might actually mean falling behind in key areas like development and feature iteration. If you're not constantly learning and improving your AI models, you're going to be left in the dust.
That makes a lot of sense, and that kind of leads into the big point the source makes. They argue that AI might be a completely different ballgame for Apple.
Absolutely.
It's all about this super fast iteration and implementation of features and software. That's a far cry from Apple's traditional approach, which is much more hardware-focused with these longer development cycles. And the article even points out all these AI features that competitors are already rolling out. Google's got Circle to Search, and Gemini Samsung's doing that cool AI object removal in their Galaxy phones, and Microsoft is integrating Copilot everywhere in Windows. It feels like everyone else is out there experimenting and pushing new features constantly.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that these AI features are not just gimmicks.
Right. They actually change how people use their devices.
Exactly. Take Google's Circle to Search. It lets you use your camera to search for things visually without even leaving the app you're in. It's really intuitive.
So it's not just about announcing AI features, it's about showing how this technology actually works in practice.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting with Apple.
Okay, so let's talk about Apple's response to all of this. They announced Apple Intelligence at WWDC 2024, which is basically their catch-all term for all their AI features.
Yeah. They made it sound pretty comprehensive.
Right. There was this mix of things that seemed kind of lighthearted, like Genmoji and Image Playground, but then also some potentially more useful stuff like writing tools and ChatGPT integration.
Sure.
And of course, they promised a big Siri upgrade. It sounded like they were finally ready to jump into the AI ring.
And people were excited, especially about the Siri revamp. It had kind of fallen behind compared to other virtual assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant.
Right. It felt like maybe Siri was finally going to catch up.
Yeah.
But here's where the whole idea of a crisis starts to emerge, according to the source.
Oh.
They talk about this really slow and incomplete rollout of Apple Intelligence features.
After the launch of the iPhone 16.
Yeah, the one that was supposed to be built for all this AI stuff.
Interesting.
And some of the key features they promise, like the improved Siri with on-screen awareness and better in-app controls, those just haven't materialized months later.
Really?
And even the features that did launch, like those notification summaries, apparently had all these issues and sometimes were even disabled. It doesn't sound like the smoothest launch.
No, it doesn't. I mean, when you build up so much anticipation and then the reality falls short, it can be a problem.
Exactly. And the delayed rollout of Siri is a big deal. It was supposed to be one of the cornerstones of Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, and those issues with even the basic features that did launch just raise more questions about the whole thing.
And then there's this other point that the article brings up, which I thought was really fascinating. The lack of tech demos for these key AI features.
Like hands-on demos for the press.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Apple usually loves to show off their new stuff to the tech journalists with these really detailed hands-on demos. But with these core AI features like the revamped Siri, they haven't really done that. And the article even quotes John Gruber, who's a pretty well-known Apple analyst, saying that this could be a bright red flag.
Oh, that's not good.
Right. And then they go on to compare this to some past situations like that whole AirPower charging mat fiasco where they showed it off, but it never actually worked.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And those Tesla robot demonstrations, which were pretty mysterious to say the least.
Where it wasn't really clear what the robots could actually do.
Yeah, exactly. And in both of those cases, the actual state of the technology was pretty unclear. So when Apple doesn't show off these core AI features in that same detailed way, it definitely raises eyebrows.
It does, especially when you think about Apple's whole approach to new products.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually all about those tightly controlled presentations and hands-on experiences.
But it's part of their brand.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So when they hold back on those demos, especially for something as important as AI, it makes you wonder if the features are actually as far along as they're saying they are.
And remember what we talked about earlier with AI being all about rapid iteration and showing how the tech actually works?
Right.
This lack of demonstrable functionality feeds right into that. It suggests that maybe these features aren't as mature or as ready for prime time as their marketing might lead you to believe.
Yeah, those comparisons to AirPower and the Tesla robots, they don't help. It makes you wonder if Apple is maybe overselling their AI capabilities.
And that brings us to the next big issue the article raises. Despite all of this, Apple has been heavily marketing Apple Intelligence with commercials, billboards, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And get this. The article even mentions a commercial that they had to delete because it advertised a Siri feature that didn't actually exist.
Oh, wow, that's embarrassing.
Right. They're basically selling this vision of what Apple Intelligence is supposed to be, but the reality hasn't caught up yet.
That kind of disconnect between marketing and reality can be a recipe for disaster. People get excited about these features, and then when they try to use them and they're not there or they don't work the way they expected, it creates this sense of disappointment.
Totally. And deleting a commercial because it showed off something that wasn't real, I mean, that's a pretty big sign that maybe they're struggling to get their messaging in line with where their AI development actually is.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a scramble behind the scenes.
And the source goes even further, suggesting that all these delays and this lack of real progress might be causing some serious embarrassment within Apple.
You think people inside the company are getting frustrated?
It wouldn't be surprising. They also raise the possibility that maybe Apple Intelligence wasn't solely designed to be this amazing new product for users.
What do you mean?
Well, they suggest that maybe it was also conceived, at least in part, to reassure investors.
Oh, to show Wall Street that they're taking AI seriously.
Exactly.
And these delays are just highlighting that disconnect even more.
Right. It's like they're saying, look, we're an AI company too, but then the reality is that they're struggling to deliver on that promise.
It makes you wonder if they were maybe a little too hasty with their announcement.
And to really drive home how risky it can be to miss out on a major technological shift. Like, this article brings up some pretty big names.
Let me guess. Nokia and BlackBerry.
Bingo. They were once the giants of the mobile phone world, but they failed to adapt to the rise of smartphones and virtual keyboards.
And they paid the price.
Big time. So what do you think Apple can learn from their mistakes?
I think the biggest takeaway from Nokia and BlackBerry is that it's not enough to just be good at what you're already doing. You have to be able to anticipate where the market is going and be willing to adapt, even if it means letting go of what made you successful in the past. For Nokia, they were so dominant in hardware that they were slow to embrace the whole software-centric approach of smartphones. And BlackBerry, they were so focused on security and those physical keyboards that they missed the boat on touchscreens and app ecosystems.
So are you saying Apple might be making similar mistakes with AI?
It's possible. Look, they're amazing at hardware and they've built this incredibly loyal user base. But if they're hesitant to fully embrace this rapid iteration cycle that's so crucial to AI development, they could be setting themselves up for trouble.
Like they're clinging to the old playbook when the rules of the game have changed.
Right, and remember those concerns about Apple relying on developers to integrate with their AI?
Yeah.
Well, if Siri isn't that compelling on its own, developers might not be so eager to jump on board.
That makes sense. And the source actually outlines several reasons why they think Apple might be struggling with AI. First, they point out that AI isn't currently at the core of Apple's business.
Which is mostly hardware and services.
Exactly, and those are super profitable for them, so they might not be as incentivized to really go all in on AI.
It's like their focus is split.
And then there's the fact that Apple's traditional advantages, like that second mover strategy and their reliance on developer enthusiasm, might not be as effective in the world of AI software. And of course, we can't forget that lack of demos for their key AI features. It's a pretty complicated situation.
It is. But do you think the fact that AI isn't their main moneymaker means they might not be investing as much in it as they should?
It's definitely possible. If they're not seeing AI as essential to their bottom line, they might be more cautious with their spending and resources.
And that could put them at a disadvantage compared to companies that are betting everything on AI.
For sure. Now, the article does acknowledge that we can't predict the future.
Nobody has a crystal ball.
Right. Apple could still pull it off. They could deliver on all their promises, and everyone might forget about these delays.
It's not impossible.
But the points they raise are definitely cause for concern. There's a lot of uncertainty hanging over Apple's AI strategy right now.
They've got a lot to prove.
So for all of you listening who are interested in following the big tech trends, what does all this mean? Well, it shows that even a company as powerful as Apple can face some serious challenges when it comes to adapting to these massive shifts in technology.
It's a reminder that no company is too big to fail.
And this whole situation with Apple Intelligence raises a lot of questions about their approach to AI. Are they really committed to it? Are they moving fast enough? Can they actually deliver on what they've promised? These are all things we'll have to wait and see.
And it's not just about Apple. This whole story highlights how dynamic the tech industry is.
Yeah.
Even the most successful companies can stumble when they're faced with a truly disruptive technology.
So the big question is, can Apple adapt and become a leader in AI? Or will they get left behind?
Only time will tell.
Now, here's where things get really interesting for you, the listener. This situation with Apple and AI really underscores a crucial point. Even the biggest, most successful companies can hit some major roadblocks when they're trying to adapt to these fundamental changes in technology. And the sources we've looked at today, they paint this picture of a company that's trying to navigate a landscape that's constantly shifting, and the outcome is far from certain. It really makes you think, what happens if a company like Apple, which is known for its seamless hardware and software integration, what happens if they can't figure out AI? What does that say about this whole technological revolution that we're in the middle of? This deep dive into Apple's AI efforts gives you a new way to look at what's happening in the world of artificial intelligence and how these major tech companies are approaching it. And it's definitely something to keep an eye on as things continue to unfold.